Jermel President and the DAE Foundation are continuing to educate and train student athletes on becoming skilled, effective, and responsible citizens in their communities. Today, I talk one-on-one with Jermel about what's new at his organization for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Jermel President, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thanks, Q. I love being here.
Oh, I appreciate it greatly. Obviously, you are a notable former basketball player here at the College of Charleston, where I'm currently sitting. And now, of course, you are the president and CEO of the DAE Foundation, which mission is really to educate and train student athletes to become skilled, effective, and responsible citizens of their communities.
Right.
Who are those types of people you're recruiting to your foundation right now?
The same type of people. You know, our staple is student athletes. And we try to really focus on that. I think being a student athlete, first you have to be a person first. Being a student athlete, first you got to have parents. Being a student athlete, you got to have direction, goals. So it's kind of a 360 approach to our community involvement in what we do with student athletes.
What direction are you taking the foundation into next?
That's a great question, Q. You know, my 22nd year of doing this, you know, we started out with the basketball training and the camps and things of that nature. And, you know, as I get older, as I understand the business a little bit more, we kind of started to evolve in more of the administration side of things, doing a lot of contracts with schools, rec departments, things of that nature. So we're still doing the training aspect of it, but it's more of a contractual approach where we really can touch communities versus individuals, families per se. So that's kind of the next chapter, and got some great things coming up as well.
Now, obviously, you've started the foundation back in 1999 when I became a freshman at Burke High School.
Yes, sir.
So let me ask you this: what is the biggest difference from 1999 to right now when you think of your nonprofit organization?
Experience, knowledge, patience, execution. Those things are very important because, you know, coming out at first, you just have an idea. You just have an interest. You want to do X, Y, Z. But through the trials and tribulation and turbulence and like any other business, I think I've come to a place where I'm grounded and I understand where I'm going for the next 10, 15 years. And it's been a wonderful journey transitioning to, I would say, Jermel President, the player, to now Jermel President, the professional.
What's some of those skills from the court that you have actually brought into the administrative office of DAE Foundation?
Oh, that's a great question, Q. I think leadership is one of the biggest things, and I think a lot of energy, a lot of direction. I tell parents all the time, yes, this sport can really be beneficial later on in life because, like, we had the meeting at 4 o'clock. I would say at 3:55, right? I'm waiting on you, right? So being timely. I think also when I call you and say, Q, I got something I want to talk to you about, you set it up. So that's the relationship, right? Teammate relationship. You got to know how to build relationships and know how to foster those relationships over a period of time. And then execution, again. When you're a teammate, you got to execute plays. So here, I got to execute my agenda and make sure everything fall in line in order to be that effective community leader that I'm trying to be, that I am, per se.
You are. Speaking of which, you're an iconic person here in town. What more relationships have you fostered with your nonprofit organization?
I would say, I mean, if I named individuals, I'll be here all day, right? But I'm going to cut the corners and say schools, hospital, colleges, other local businesses. Those people that run those organizations, I mean, well, they are people too because people run organizations. But I think collectively, I've built a slew of individuals.
Right.
DAE Foundation. And whenever we do things, I can call somebody and they're right on it. So those are the kind of relationship that I love to have and that I cherish.
Yes, sir. Okay, you talk about obviously trials and tribulations within your organization. What were those trials and tribulations that have allowed you to be professionally grounded to this day?
I would think like again, when you're a team, sometimes you take bad shots, right? You might call a bad play, right? So I think in the last 22 years of running the organization, I've made some bad plays. I took some bad shots, and I've learned from them. And those bad shots or bad plays might be able to might have been partnering up with the a wrong business, a wrong entity, might have brought the wrong teammate into my organization, right? Those things can happen. So I've learned a lot about reading people, reading their agenda, reading their interest, and making sure their interests lining up with my interest. You know what I mean? Like anything else, if I call a business or I'm looking for some type of involvement, they're going to say yes or no, depending on if what I do fits with them. So instead of making a blanket approach to businesses and people, I've learned to break that down and execute my approach for people that I know this is a win-win for both parties.
And what are your interests right now, Mr. Jermel?
My interest?
Yes, sir, when it comes to the nonprofit?
Well, it's a big thing right now, Q, that we're focusing on is the mental health of student athletes. You know, again, that's I'm currently in school right now taking some classes at Trident Tech.
Okay.
Because I have the work experience dealing with families, right? But when you got that paperwork, being a licensed counselor, that adds a lot of credibility to your approach. Also, open the doors up for contracts and other different avenues. So that's my approach now. In the mental health aspect, is that when you're dealing with a kid or working with a family, and the kid is not really playing well, there's some other issues that's going on. And but first, when I was really focusing on just a student, I was focused on the physical aspect of their skill. Now it's more of the mental aspect of that player. What are their likes? What are their needs? What moves them? What does not move them? What's their family environment like? So all those things come into play, and that's our approach now, focusing on the mental aspect of the student athletes.
You know, going back to back in the day to the early 90s, you never heard about mental health. How do you approach that now as a former basketball player?
Well, the thing is, it's all about environment, right? It's all about having kids in an environment that's a healthy environment. If they're in a situation where kids act out because they see their home situation they're not happy with, right? So I think that's the start of finding a kid in their situation, seeing what's not what's wrong with them, but seeing the problem that's causing them not to be able to behave effectively. And it comes from the home. It comes from it's a diet thing. It's an thing. It's a family environment thing. So if we can change those dynamics, the kid will be a better athlete, a better person. And then the backside of that is depression. If you don't attack it, if you don't get into it and approach it early, then those kids are depressed and have a lot of other problems later on in life.
Okay, let me ask you this, Mr. Jermel. Obviously, mental health wasn't a big issue back in the 90s, but do you believe it was hidden among many of your team members, maybe you even?
I would say, here's the thing. If coaches back in the day would say, hey, deal with it, stick it out, be tough enough, work it out. Well, everybody don't have that mental capacity to work it out and be tough with it, right? So if you give that approach to every athlete, you're only reaching 30% of your athletes. You're missing out on another 70% of athletes. But I think if it's a mental approach, then you can gather the other 60%, right? You can have a much better success rate when you focus on that particularly. So that's our approach of looking at the whole aspect: family, kid, what's their situation, diet, schools, their environment, and seeing how the skill development we do makes kids feel better, makes them feel happy. But when they leave the gym or the court, what's the environment after that? And that's the kind of things we're focused on right now. So we're dealing a lot with families of bookending the kids' approach.
So what is that success rate within your organization as far as trying to get those kids to where they need to be mentally?
Well, like you said, I think we're in our second year since the pandemic of transitioning into this new approach with it. So I think during the course of our upcoming programs and our podcast that we're talking about,
Sure.
like you said, people are starting to be more aware of the terminology, right? Because now everybody shy away from it because it seemed like a disease, it seemed like something wrong with them. But all of us have issues, and sometimes we deal with them internally. We talk to people, and the kids, when they can't identify those problems. So the families have to identify, get the kids come some type of, I wouldn't say help, but just attend to the situation and help talk through some of the problems they have.
Not to get personal, that is, but what are those problems that you all are seeing right now that is continually to be a problem?
I think it's the ability there's no drive, right? There's no drive. If a kid can't do a drill, or if they figure this is too hard for them, I think most of the time they will back out of the situation or complain about an injury or something. So I think right now it's just that, and I'm kind of contradicting myself, but I think the mental toughness is not there as before. Now social media plays a lot with that, because kids may see other kids, other situations, and then try to compare themselves with that. And then when they can't get to that level, then it's a problem. But the thing is, what they don't know is that those other kids are working. They got supporting cast to help them get to a certain level. And that's the kind of thing, what I'm trying to do is put that in place so kids can get that same benefit.
And of course, you got, when you were in school, you had a lot of help. You had Coach Earl Brown, you had all sorts of people here at the College of Charleston. How do you instill that into the kids today?
Well, I think my approach is, again, dealing with the parents, right? Making it a blanket approach for my programs of working with the parents and have the parents work through their kids. With my focus with that is just from the academic side, from the skill side. I work with kids all the time with shooting, dribbling, things of that nature. And I do talk to them, all right? Like anything else, counseling is very, very important. So I kind of use some of the counseling approaches in my skill sessions. But I also talk to parents about their approach with their kid as well. Like we have programs where we meet once a month. We Zoom with kids once a month, and we talk about their diet, their approach, their ability to stick to their agenda, workout plans. And then eventually, routine builds character. So eventually, if the kid's doing something, they have a checklist where they can actually check every day that they did something. And you go back last month, you see all your days checked. Man, that's something that'll get you going. Or you go back and look, you see you only got 3 days out of the month. You got some work to do. So those are the measurements we do when we're dealing with families of helping close that gap.
And how else are you closing that gap?
As far as working with the kids?
Yeah, and yes, sir, those measurements that you
those measurements. Well, a couple of things that we're doing right now is we got a big event coming up called a Safety Day. And actually, I can't put too much of details out. So, but in our Safety Day, here again, the biggest problem that student athletes, for one, seatbelts, right? Seatbelts. Let's say, for example, here's a college that signed a big athlete. Now it's Friday, they're going out, hanging out, and then they had too much to drink, no seatbelts, get in an accident, and it's fatal. So the importance of that, along with, we're talking about the mental health, right? Coaches deal with a lot of players that aren't ready to be coached at that level. Mm-hmm. So the conditioning thing from the middle school, high school, and then college is a big preparation. As you know, I talk to college coaches all the time. And that's the main thing they say is that, Jermel, players, and they're not ready. Not ready athletically, but not ready mentally, right? So to answer your question, I think through all the things that we're doing, all the programs, we kind of help families see those terminology. And then we have, not just me, we have resources that they can go and get the information from, because I can't do it all, right? I only have people that really want to partner with me that can give the resource to the families that need it.
Wow. So I want to get back to that in just a second, but let me ask you this. How many Tri-County student athletes may be at a very increased risk for mental health problems right now?
In the pandemic, when kids wasn't in school in 2 years, right? A lot of grades, a lot of reading levels, everything has dropped. So I think in the next year or two, maybe this year, you're going to see a lot of situations, a lot of problems starting to happen that we never see before because of those issues. So I don't have an accurate percentage, but I do think that if we don't address the issue, and it's not, I don't want to say it's an issue, it's a problem. It's not that. It's not a collective unit. It's very, detailed and very specified between those individuals. So I think I don't have a statistical fact, but I think moving forward, it's going to be some issues coming to school. We already hearing, reading the papers, a lot of things going on right now, even with the teachers, right? How do they deal with the kids and those problems? So not just the kids, how do the teachers deal with those issues as well?
Now, how many of student athletes that you've actually come in contact with, Mr. Jermel, that have actually had the pressure to adhere to academic deadlines combined with obviously excessive sporting commitments?
Well, an estimation I probably work with probably about 10 to 7, 8,000 kids, right? So, and that's talking about training camps, what have you. Sorry, what was your question again?
Yeah, how many of those student athletes that you have actually come into contact with have actually had pressure to adhere to academic deadlines combined with obviously the excessive sporting commitments?
Well, I would say majority of them, because being a student athlete, you have to have those commitments academically and athletically. So again, if you got those timelines and those just different energies from academics and athletics, and you're dealing with an issue at home, that's even more pressure, right? So, and that's the issue where that's a situation where kids are not being effective because they're juggling 3 different things at one time. How do we lower that weighted agenda for the kids and make sure they can focus just on the athletics and the academics?
Now, this might be a difficult question, but how many physical difficulties are that actually lead to mental health problems that you see in most of these kids?
You say how many what?
Physical difficulties.
Physical difficulties. Well, I think the physical difficulties can lead to a lot of mental health, because if the kids want to play at the next level, play in high school and don't make a team because of the lack of physical attributes, that could be an issue, right? So how do we redirect those energy and let the kid know, hey, you still gonna be involved in sports, right? Because then, hey, you got sports agents, you got people that do the interviews like yourself, right? That do sports. I'm drawing a blank here. Commentators, right? Yeah. So again, resourcefully, how do we identify, okay, kid, 8th grade, not going to make a team. How do we redirect the energy to make sure you stay around the sport, all right? Because that's very important when kids can build relationships and friends and have a good self-esteem. Then they don't have to worry about playing in sports, because they're playing the sport for that camaraderie. They're playing the sport to be around people and get their attention and to show their skills off. But if you don't do that, don't get that, how do we redirect the energy? And that's what we're in the tip end, in the embryo stage, of focus on different programs to make sure that happens.
What programs would be ideal?
Well, good question. We got a resource center. Again, I can't put too much information out. Sure. We're working on a resource center for athletes that I got a couple of investors and people that's working on, so I can't really put too much out. Sure. But obviously, when it's ready, we'll talk again and I'll give it to you. But that's the thing we're doing. It's a resource center for student athletes, because like business, a business center has a resource center. If you're an entrepreneur, you go to this center, you get tips and ways on how to business, how to be an entrepreneur. Yeah. You also have people come in that were former entrepreneurs and come talk to the upcoming ones. So that process needs to be established here as well. We're working on that.
Now, I know earlier you talked about obviously diets. How many of these students right now that you've come in contact with that really don't eat well?
Out of 7,000, probably 699, right? It's just a bad approach. And that's, again, our focus of teaching the importance of nutrition. Yeah, it's to be healthy, but you cannot be eating sodas and candy and before a game. Your body just won't allow that. So the education got to go to the parents because they're the one that's buying the food, right? Go to the parents on how to prepare a pregame meal, a postgame meal, right? A during the week meal, an injury meal. Those things are very important when it comes to student athlete development.
And because of this, I mean, what percentage of these student athletes that you come into contact with that actually have, say, for instance, mood swings?
That's a very good question, Q. And again, I would say about 40%, about 4 out of 10 kids that come in with mood swings. That got to do with culturally. It got to do with all different aspects of situations. Because what I try to implement to parents is that, well, Jermel, my kid come in, he wouldn't go hard. We don't play hard. It's not aggressive. And my first thing I ask him is, do your kid have chores? I'm like, no, he don't have. Well, if your kid got chores and they got certain things they got to do every day, that would force, right, that routine work. And then you got to make them mad. You got to piss kids off at some point to make them respond to you. So if kids not aggressive on the court, he or she haven't developed that inner anger, just full of anger to take it out on somebody. So you have to give kids chores. You have to make them responsible, and that leads to responsibility on the court.
And what is that responsibility on the court these days?
The responsibility on the court is just, I call it an ROI. I say, hey, John, you got these new sneakers. Your mom or dad is paying money to come for you to learn basketball, right? When you come here, go hard. Do everything you're supposed to do. Leave everything on the floor. That's being responsible. That's showing a return on investment to your parents, right? So it's a reward system on both sides. And the responsibility is that being on time when you get to the gym, going through all your workouts you're supposed to with no attitude, right? And absorbing, getting everything you need to get better that day. That's just a day-to-day responsibility.
And how many of those students do you see adhere to those day-to-day responsibilities?
I think about I would say all, because I've in emails and texts I get, parents are like, hey, Jermel, thank you. You know, John wasn't making his bed when we first started you. Now he's making his bed. The same thing that they're telling him to do, he's doing now. He's making better grades because they're more focused. And that comes from the counseling while training. Because you got to build a relationship with the kids. You got to find out what moves them, what does. Some kids I can yell at, and some kids I can't.
Right.
So that depends on, again, the environment. If they're getting yelled at home, they don't want to be yelled at here, right? So if they're not getting yelled at home, maybe this yelling might spark them and get them going. So I kind of pick and pop on which approach to take depending on the kid.
And that brings me to my next question. I thought many of those student athletes actually have the ability to find balance between academics and obviously athletics.
That's rare because I think most kids come to me focused on the academic part, right? Because that's most important.
Yes.
Then their interest is basketball and the sport. So now here I'm taking a kid that's focusing on academics but likes basketball. But when you come to see me, basketball got to be just as important as academics, right? So the expectations of being responsible have to be there. So I think through the planning and the approach and having the schedule with the families, that allows a kid to kind of work themselves into the routine. Because if you want to be a collegiate athlete, these are things you got to do starting now.
And speaking of which, I just asked this: how many women's sports participants do you know, or actually know where to go to find help for mental health issues?
That's a great question. I think a lot of players, females or males, may be going to their family doctor, right, to get that information. But I don't think no one really has I'm going to talk to Quintin counseling service, right? That's not, I don't think we have, as student athletes, we don't have that go-to yet, even though I don't know of it, and that's something I need to research, but that's not something that I don't think we have a luxury of having. If when you watch someone watching this and you hear it, if you don't, please put in the comment section so we can definitely approach that.
Is student athletes' mental health really viewed secondary to physical health in your mind?
I think the mental stability adds to the success from the physical to the physical side, right? What you think, you act, right? So you can be strong physically, that's a natural occurrence, right? But if you're strong physically and you're strong mentally, then I think you got a huge advantage. Now, if you're strong mentally and not physically, you can make up for the physical aspect of it with a strong mind. You know what I'm saying? So the mental aspect, and again, when I first started, I focused all on the physical. Right. I wasn't thinking about the mental. I didn't think about, well, John's coming in mad today. Why is he mad? John, let's get this workout. No. John, hey, what's going on? You didn't come in today like you came in last week. How was school today? Well, this kid such and such and such. Now I know where to start from. We had a better success workout because that was initiated. And from the female side of it, females have, different times a month where they have issues. I would always ask the parent, hey, if you don't mind, can you just let me know the time? Because if she's coming in here and she's upset because of nature, and I'm pushing her, she's not responding because there's an issue going on I don't know about. But if I know, hey, mom, give me that wink, like, hey, I know I take it easy on sharing today, right? So those things are huge.
And so how are coaches in an ideal position that is to identify when their student athletes are actually having difficulty because the coaches actually spend so much quality time with them?
Well, you go for body language. Just like a teacher have to know their students, a coach have to know their player, right? If I know John walk in, he's on his toes every day and he's the first one in practice. If John's coming in the third one in practice walking slow, I know I got to talk to him. There's an issue. So I think from a coach, a trainer standpoint, even though I am an educator as well, so that's why not tapping myself, but that's why I'm good at what I do, because I take the teacher approach and I accompany with my training, right? And so I'm able to weed out those things. So yeah, I think that's very important that coaches need to understand how to identify and then how to approach those situations when they see them.
Now, how can the coach actually recommend prompt treatment to decrease the student athlete's time away from training and competition?
Well, the thing is, if the coach don't try to find a way to approach that and make that better, the player won't be effective for their coach. How can you tell a player that's going through some mental issues to run a play? How could you expect them to perform when it's 64-64 with 10 seconds left? He had a bad day today, right? I'm not putting them in the game at that time because I know it's just not there right now. So again, it's all about identifying and being honest with yourself and making those crucial decisions as a coach or a teacher.
Now, how are you actually educating those coaches and players about depression, anxiety, suicide prevention, substance use, body image, eating disorders, healthy relationships, and the psychological effects of, say, an injury?
You said, how am I equipped in that?
Yes, well, how are you teaching the coaches and players?
Well, I don't teach the coaches or players. I think what I do from a standpoint is my experience of working with student athletes and around a game for so long, right? So again, that initial experience goes along with me on how to pour what the kids need from a skill set. I can pour that into that kid, right? So the second aspect, again, we talked about is the mental side, is the emotional side. Right. So I think through my experience identifying that, now I'm getting in school and getting educated on how to approach it, I'm bookending that approach. So now I got the experience along with the knowledge, so I can really put it all together. So that helps me work with families and students as well.
So certainly there are a number of risks for student athletes as far as them developing mental health issues, but are there any positive emotional benefits?
There are positive. There are a lot of them. Kids will stop playing at some point, right? But they got to go into the work environment, the work field, right? So when you talk about how do I use basketball, things that I've done, into the business side of it. The same thing from kids. You've been with a team, you had a coach, boss, for how long you've been playing. So now, even when I work with a lot of businesses, I say student athletes are the best people to hire. No offense, but we can regulate our emotions a lot better. Because if I'm averaging 22 points a game and I had 4 points or 0 points in this game last night, how do I get going for the next game? How do I get going for practice?
Right.
So if you have a bad week at work, and if you don't know how to regulate that emotion, you don't carry that same energy to the next week. So I think the benefits of being a student athlete, understanding how to approach these environmental, mental things, whatever, it carries over to the afterlife when you get into society and working and how to dealing with people.
So how did you approach public service as a coach, an educator, and as a former student athlete?
Well, I think public service is the same thing, because you're dealing with, take an instance where a kid is working out with his player, right? And he got to overheat or get a heart attack or something. If the other kid don't know CPR, he's like, how could you approach that? Another situation, what if the driver's license, if you're in Charleston and you're going to South Carolina for college, you don't have no driver's license, how could you operate? How could you deal without a vehicle? And I just had to get my taxes done. Well, not taxes done, but I had to pay my tax expired and had to go get it done.
Right.
So that's the whole process of going down Meeting Street, going to the tax base, getting your decal. Like, if kids don't know those protocols, how can they be effective in society? So we gotta put these resources in their hands so they can be productive citizens moving forward.
Jermel President, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
I love being here. This is my fifth, sixth time, Q?
I believe so. I got to double check that.
I'm going for a record. Q. I appreciate you, big guy, so much.
Thank you. Anytime. You're welcome.